Azim, and Anne, and all the participants here. So I'll briefly introduce which kind of convenes the three meetings that we are doing. So I think we are back in December. So this is the second chapter of the event, and then we have distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues and fellow scholars. I think the point that I want to drive home is the academic boundaries, and that is something that we, the collaborators of the so we four are leading one of a Spark project on Partition and research collaboration. Abbreviation is Spark, initiated by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Is a significant step in the direction. Working on this project since 2023. So the workshop was like one of the key deliverables of the project. And then when we were planning the workshop, we increasingly realized that it was very difficult to address the kind of three different perspectives of historical consciousness that has emerged in three places, namely India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So we were finding it difficult to integrate these perspectives together. This workshop was designed, initially we were designing it as a one workshop, and I'll tell you why we have planned it the way we have planned. So this workshop was designed to address the geographical insularity that has profoundly shaped how Partition is remembered and interpreted in each country. So however, conducting such a workshop on a theme that transcends national borders was not without challenges, chief among them being the restrictions imposed by contemporary visa regimes. And when we were planning the workshop back in 2023, India-Pakistan was a strict no-no, but Bangladesh was still easier. But what transpired in the last 8-9 months was really unfortunate, and I think it was really appropriate that the way we planned, and at least colleagues from three countries could at least meet digitally. So these logistical hurdles are a stark reminder of how political boundaries continue to dictate the possibilities of intellectual exchanges, by which I mean what we cannot do, what we can do. So in very important ways, these national borders also determine the kind of scholarship that we pursue. They allow us to do certain things, they do not allow us to do certain things, and this workshop, the way we planned and the way that it is taking shape, is a stark reminder to this. So in our work, Pedagogic Insularities and Fragmented Identities, reconsidering worldly humanism in Indian higher education, which Debjani and I co-authored recently. So we explored how increasing bureaucratization of Indian universities has contributed to pedagogic insularity. Rigid institutional frameworks have distanced academic discourse from broader humanistic and global perspectives, creating an education system that is inward-looking and fragmented. And I'm sure that this is not different in either Pakistan or Bangladesh. So this insularity not only reinforces compartmentalized identities, but also prevents students from engaging with knowledge in a holistic and interconnected manner. So the more we realized this, we thought of reaching out to you, as in BRAC on the Bangladesh side of it, and then Lahore University of Management Sciences, LUMS on the other side of the border, Pakistan. And we are grateful that both of you agreed and consented to, do the two respective chapters of our workshop. So that's the whole background story of it. So the kind of the December event is now followed by these two events in Pakistan and Bangladesh. So the physical, political, and pedagogic borders that emerged from partition have led to distinct historical narratives rooted in national identity, political developments, and lived experiences. Each nation has constructed its own understanding, narratives, pedagogy of partition shaped by state policies, educational frameworks, collective memory, and so on and so forth. So we are discussing these themes in all three workshops, as you can see in the next 1.5 days or so. Recognizing these variations, we structured the workshop to engage with the specific historical consciousness of each country. So I'm still using the expression "the workshop" because at least personally, I'm seeing this as a collective, as a unit rather than three different workshops. So I'm using the singular here. So in India, as you know, partition is largely viewed as a moment of tragic rupture from the British rule. In Pakistan, it's more like a establishment of a homeland. In Bangladesh, it is further complicated by the 1971 thing. A lot of these different national nuances, national consciousness come into play the way we remember and narrativize partition. The discourse often leads to silos. That's the whole point. It leads to silos the way we pursue scholarship on partition. So the point of the designing the workshop in the way that we did is so that we do not work in silos but bring these different strands and nuances into conversation. So by dismantling rigid boundaries in our academic structures, we can push back against bureaucratic constraints that limit critical engagement and reimagine higher education as a space for meaningful cross-cultural dialogue. Understanding these different perspectives, we adapted our approach in each country, ensuring that discussions are rooted in local historical consciousness while also fostering a broader transnational dialogue. Such academic exchanges are critical in challenging insular narratives and promoting a shared understanding of the history of partition. As we move forward, it is imperative that we continue to push against the constraints of geographical and pedagogic insularity, and as educators, researchers, and scholars, our academic endeavors reflect a commitment to global dialogue and intellectual inclusivity. So that's the whole, the ideological disposition that we come from, and that is something that programs of both the workshops here in Bangladesh and Pakistan, I'm sure, going to reflect in the next few days. So over to you, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Debjani. Thank you so much. It's good to hear the thinking behind organizing this and how these national borders have so solidified that we cannot even meet in person, but we can meet intellectually, we can meet online, so
sure.
That provides space and scope for fresh thought. With that, let's go on to Debjani.
Thank you very much. And I am delighted to be here and especially see my own collaborators, although virtually. And thank you, BRAC, and the Department of English for taking up the mantle. And I really want to thank all the people on the ground who have been working to put this workshop together. I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the methodologies because that is one of the interests that we have for this project. And I'm going to just very briefly give you the methodologies and the way in which partition studies, the area of partition studies have been shaped over the last 2 decades or so, so that, you know, the young scholars who are here, they can sort of see the broad changes that have been taking place, you know, over the decades. So partition studies, as we know today, is just a very humongous field and a humongous term that encompasses very myriad methodologies informed by history, sociology, literary studies, oral history, border studies, gender studies, memory studies, to just to name a few. And all these disciplines animate the field in a way which is really very interesting to see and to experience. But let me begin at the beginning and talk a little bit about how, and of course I'm going to, of course, talk only about the Indian side, because later on Anne and later on Firdous is going to talk about Sindh or Punjab, West Punjab and Bangladesh. So as we know, the Second World War, and immediately its aftermath had made it clear that the logic of power and profit, which was driving the Raj, was coming to an end. And particularly the Labour victory of 1945 made it clear that the British could no longer see it viable to remain in India. But it is very interesting that the tripartite talks, which were very swift between the Congress, the Muslim League, and the Raj, these talks, which settled for the partition of the country, did not see or did not even think about the carnage which would follow or which would precede the declaration of the partition. So that is something which is very strange, and we sometimes when we think about it, we also see that this extraordinary event whose shadows we still see all over the subcontinent, and whose the lessons that the British learned in 47 in India was to be applied in Palestine in 1948, and all these ramifications were something that people did not anticipate, that what was actually going to happen on the ground. So the partition actually meant a redrawing of the map, creating new borders and borderlands, and millions of people were crossing these freshly defined boundaries. In West Bengal alone, an estimated 30 lakh Hindu refugees entered by 1960. This is, of course, a conservative estimate, while 7 to 9 lakh Muslims left for East Pakistan. So for more than 1 million people who were facing displacement and murder, the absolutely fantastic thing was that all these dominant hegemonic structures of public memory of the partition had never commemorated these events with any memorial. And until recently, there was not even a museum in India dedicated to the partition. So, however, in the last decade or so, some shifts in partition studies can be discerned, but Jaya Chatterjee, of course, mentions that at the heart of the subject there is a gaping void, because, I quote, we still do not know why people who had lived cheek by jowl for so long fell upon each other in 1947 and its aftermath with a ferocity that has few parallels in history. End of quote. So this, in the late 1990s, for instance, in India, Ritu Menon and Kamla Bhasin commented on how the political history of the partition did not have a feminist history, for instance, or a social history to look at the events. At the same time, Urvashi Butalia began to retrieve through oral narratives some of the invisible players of the partition, the women, the children, and the scheduled castes. And Butalia's contention was that we cannot even begin to understand what happened in 1947 unless we look at how people remember it. So these works, as well as other works like Kathinka Sinha, Kerkhoff's study of the Momins in Jharkhand, Sara Ansari's study of Muslim refugees in Sindh, Shail Mairam's study of the Meos in Rajasthan, and of course Papia Ghosh's work on the Biharis in Bangladesh, have actually questioned the homogeneity of the nationalist discourse and have marked a very significant break from the exclusive concentration on high politics. So it is from this period period onwards, from the 1990s onwards, we see that the unfinished agenda of nation building is also being questioned and commented upon, especially with the issues of the participation of the Dalits and the minorities in the formation of the nation state, as well as issues of social mobilization. For instance, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's work on the scheduled caste mobilization around 1947, and Nilesh Bose's work on the discourse on Pakistan as disseminated among Bengali East Pakistani intellectuals leading up to 47. So, on the one hand, you know, of course, and then we also see the turn towards the literary, which is around this time, you know, the intellectual resources made available by creative writers begin to be looked at with more and more details. And this sort of makes partition studies now a very exciting field, because it takes literary representations as very seriously. So this is a new resource for remembering and representing the partition, where social relations, locality, memory all come under the historian's scrutiny. And because memory is deeply implicated in imagination, so an engagement with the literary archive can be a very important and significant way to enter the field. So through the late 1980s and 90s, scholars working in partition studies have striven to understand the nitty-gritty of the anti-colonial movement and the events leading up to 1947. And this is, of course, being aided by the private papers of very important nationalist leaders, both in India and in Pakistan, which have also complicated the whole field. And therefore, we are now looking at partition as in a very different way, and so it's difficult to now see this as a kind of single linear narrative which is centered around anti-colonial nationalism alone. So by the 2000, you know, we have issues of caste, gender, environment, communities and regions, and lesser known histories from below, so to say, began to be juxtaposed against the history of nationalism, which had earlier ignored the sporadic, localized, regional histories of ordinary people. And one very good example that comes to mind is, of course, the conjunction of Tenaga Andolon and the movement for Pakistan, which has been commemorated so beautifully in Elias's Khwabnama. Or the Scheduled Caste Federation, the history of Scheduled Caste Federation and Jogendranath Mondol's impact on mobilization of the depressed classes. So, so we can no longer ignore rehabilitation, relief camps, doles, citizenships that become urgent new lexicons in partition studies. And as scholars in the field, you know, we are now more attentive towards readers and writers across borders, and fluidly incorporate, you know, Bengali, Urdu, Punjabi, Sindhi writers in our syllabuses. It's wonderful. And our partition archives have taken up very complex characteristics, and citizens have made efforts to commemorate the events through museums and storytellings. I will use Sumit Sarkar's word to describe what is happening at this moment. This new phase he calls interactional history, that makes an attempt to go beyond national stories to understand the fragments that make up the whole, without, of course, losing coherence of the telling of this tragic tale. And this interactional history, a very good example of that is what we had this morning today, where people from across the world have joined and we are having a conversation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Debjani. That really sets the stage for us and also makes us understand how we will take the conversation that we're going to have in the following 2 days forward, how this interdisciplinarity, where we go beyond our disciplinary boundaries as well as national boundaries to discover history, to discover memory, to discover memorialization, etc. So thank you, Debjani. That was very inspiring, as usual. So we keep a note of all that has been said, because we will carry this forward. So with that, we should turn to Anne now, Anne Murphy from the University of British Columbia. I don't know what time it is at your place, because I have no idea the West Coast times, how far they are from us. The East Coast, at least, I know. So please, Anne, do start.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so it's 8:30 p.m. here. We're 14 hours behind you. We're on Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. So I thought in my comments today, I'll do just a few things. Firstly, I'd like to provide, just building what Debjani just gave us in terms of her big picture analysis of partition studies, as well as with Avishek talks about kind of steamed what we're trying to do here. So I thought I would provide a little bit of an overview of some of the fresh historiographical innovations we've seen so far, and that I think we will see. So now what's happening in Bangladesh, as well as what will be happening in 6 days in Lahore in Pakistan. So that's our next stop on the way. And secondly, to connect to that, to a component that is particularly prominent in our next stop in LUMS in Lahore, the integration of historical representation with the creative and visual arts. And then lastly, as I do that, I'm going to like to comment a little bit about some of the significance of all the work we're doing for the global South Asian diaspora. On that point, I know we're seeing exciting work in this conference, in the next panel on the Bengali diaspora community in the Malay Peninsula. I'll try and come forward. I don't know if I can. I have put my son to bed. But if I can, I would like to be there. So in our work in Silchar, as well as in these conferences in LUMS and BRAC University, we see exciting innovations in the historical representation of partition. In Silchar, for example, in addition to exciting engagements with literary studies, which we also see in this conference, we also saw significant innovation in historical method, drawing on new sources and new approaches to sources. And that's important for us to mark, I think. Although many presentations in the conference engaged deeply with oral history, which is now very well established as a method in partition studies, they did so with attention to new perspectives and new topics. So stories that just have not yet been told. So we really still do need actually conventional history to tell these stories. Ananda Ghoshal shared her beautiful nuanced work grounded in cross-border oral history practice that excavates the experience of Bengal borderlands and the commonalities across them. And that work, which kind of breaks down national boundaries, again, we need to really note that as important, as a new, I think, direction in partition studies. We saw exciting work by Yatin Patra on the Saraiki community of Delhi, also grounded in oral historical practice, but also with attention to the long durée history of the Saraiki language and its very complicated and contested relationship with the Punjabi language. Musaddiq Hussein's work documenting the histories and experiences of people in the Kargil region and the borderlands of Ladakh, and the everyday contradictions of the border there. And Jabin Yasmin's work on the National Register of Citizens in Assam as a continuing unfolding of the violence of partition. So we see attention to new voices and new perspectives and domains, I think, in the BRAC program as well, which is what's so exciting. For example, looking at Radio Pakistan, I think is really interesting as a new domain for trying to understand how partition was represented, and I look forward to knowing more about that. And also in the next panel that's coming next on Bengali borderlands and also issues of belonging for non-Bengalis in Bangladesh. In our next workshop in Lahore, just to give you a sense of what's coming next in Pakistan, we will see important work on Christians and the story of partition in West Pakistan, now Pakistan, by Yaqub Bagash, and important attention to the province of Sindh in our understanding of partition, with 2 presentations on that topic. I think we learned really vividly in Assam the importance of locality in the partition story, and indeed, as Avishek has told us, that really was the reason for this project from the beginning. So this theme continues to be central. We also, at LUMS, will see attention to the kind of nationalizing discourses that undergird partition studies or partition narratives, not partition studies, we hope, whether that be in Manikul Sharma's presentation or on how popular representations in India depict partition, or Kamran Azhar Ali's exploration of something parallel in the Pakistan side. Attention to archives, museums, and other memory-making institutions is an important feature of your conference, of course, through Capabilities keynote and elsewhere. And it's been a recurrent theme across all of the workshops, exploring diverse interventions in really public history of partition. And that's, I think, something very new. And again, gets to this idea of interactional history that Debjani so beautifully noted. In Silchar, this was explored in work, for example, on the Delhi Partition Museum, and work on digital archives and digital scapes. Silchar professor Sumatliya Mukhopadia's exploration of the role of the curator in the formation of the virtual Kolkata Partition Museum was particularly important, I think, allowing us to interrogate our own roles as scholars in constructing partition narratives, and that's a point that my colleague, our colleague Avishek, has emphasized in all his interventions. At LUMS, Navtej Poriwal and Ellery Goodwin from the School of Oriental and African Studies in the UK will explore the use of digital reality in the representation of partition. And then Cecilia Baruzza, University of Essex, will explore the use of podcasts. Siobhan Lambert-Hurley, also based in the UK, will explore food as a kind of memorial technology. So there are many commonalities within the 3 workshops, as well as, I think, some significant differences. The centrality of place, of course, is why we are having these 3 workshops, are really, as I think Avishek said, 1 workshop in 3 different places. And I hope that, we all hope that in the publications that we want to result from this work, we can mobilize all the diversity of all 3 instantiations of the workshop to achieve that kind of representation of that diversity. There were significant contributions in Silchar and now at BRAC from the program. We can see on the role of literature, as Debjani noted, right, this important turn to the literary, but that's less prominent in the Lahore workshop, I will note. But one feature that we do see in LUMS that will be happening that's a bit unusual in relation to the BRAC and Silchar workshops, and that's why I want to call it out and call attention to it, is a focus on creative visual representations. Although Ishrat Jahan's work might address this, I don't know what visual representations will be addressed in that presentation. So 3 of the presentations at LUMS will address the visual arts and the question of the visual representation of partition. We'll also have a reading of a Punjabi short story with English translation that I'm still finishing, and a performance or meditation on the creative and partition. So I want to highlight that as particularly important for multiple reasons. So firstly, just as with literature, the creative and the visual domain provides the opportunity to work through and with partition history, and to name that which is not so easily named in the conventional archive. And I think that's true of the literary as well as the visual. One has to know the distinction between that which is actually factual and what we imagine, because we know too well today how easily truths are manufactured. But that can't really limit our engagement with the imagination at the same time. So even recognition of that limitation cannot actually stop us from engaging with the imagination. Secondly, I think the communicative potential of the visual arts speaks to people in a different way from the written domain, which is what we as scholars have all been trained to engage with. So there's incredible potential for bridging the gap between the visual and our more conventional modes of historical and literary and other work research, to speak in a different mode. Even if the history being relayed is actually still the same history, right? Or the history from the modes we already know. There's something simply different in seeing it, I think, in a creative and critical mode. And then distinguishing this from a more mainstream perspective or mainstream representation, but in this kind of creative and critical mode, which is what I'd like to highlight. Lastly, I think we have the potential to take into account our own agency. And this is something, again, I said Avishek has been really emphasizing in all his interventions through this process, our own intervention in the representation of the past, as well as the past itself, right? To engage with that divide, that tension, right? As we engage also with the public who have their own ideas. So I'm going to give an example, so I'm going to play show and tell, then I'm going to show some slides, if I'm allowed. I think I am allowed. Yes, I can share. Can you see my screen?
It's right here.
Yeah?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, we
Great. Okay, good. So I'm going to get started. Nice. Because I wanted to talk about one mode, and this is where my presentation does finally deal with Punjab more, because I've been talking more generally across conferences. You can still see me? So I wanted to give an example of this exhibition that we did. I was a co-curator in British Columbia, Canada. That's, again, where I'm focusing on Punjab, of an exhibition that was called Duje Paase To, so from the other side, arts across the border in the Pakistani and Indian Punjabs, which brought together work by international artists who had completed residencies either in the Pakistani Punjab or the Indian Punjab on the legacy of partition today and the representation of partition in the present. So the exhibition was held in Canada, and I guess for me that signals some of the importance of these stories for the South Asian diaspora, that there was a real interest in representing these stories, as well as a potential role, we hope, for international partnership, just like we're doing. Which brought this workshop about, right? To enhance cross-border dialogue and exchange and reconnect stories of loss and cross-border engagement for dispersed communities, as well as for those grounded in South Asia. So our big plan was we were going to bring we had residencies in Pakistan, residencies in India. We wanted to bring everyone together in Canada for the exhibition. And then, of course, COVID happened, and so all of that was kind of ruined. But anyway, that was the plan. So I want to just show you some images from the exhibition to highlight the reason that someone like me, who's a pretty conventional historian with interest also in the literary, why I find it really exciting to engage with this idea of seeing history or seeing interpretation. So this is another view of the gallery, and the piece on the left side of your screen, I hope, shows you a film that was made by one of the artists that featured oral history work, but also in Gurmukhi script and Shamukhi or Urdu script, you see the words Duje Paase To, so from the other side. So that's where we got our title from. This work was by Shashank Bishawaria, and this was a beautiful work where he is based in the Indian Punjab, so through a colleague of mine in Pakistan, he was able to get footage of fields in the Pakistani Punjab, and he put them on screens in different places in the Indian Punjab, and then he recorded people's responses to them. And it was fascinating to see both the discourses of commonality as well as the discourses of othering that people brought to these images, like, oh, look how they are. or look, it's just like us. We saw these really interesting kind of ways in which people were negotiating with both the problem of commonality and the problem of difference. So all that came out of again, the work itself. Rachita Bhojapati's work is a beautiful kind of meditation on the erasure of Persian in India today, in the Indian Punjab. So you can see there's a screen here. She had a light above it, and so she has words in Shamukhi or Urdu script and in Gurmukhi, and the only ones that come out through it are the words in Gurmukhi, right? So this kind of erasure of Shamukhi script or Urdu script, as well as a kind of rejection of the idea of Persian itself, even though it's so important to the Punjabi language still today. This is some views of this piece in the gallery in Abbotsford. The other shot was at another gallery. We had an exhibition also in London. The piece on the wall you can see is by Sana Iqbal. She visited an abandoned site and took every piece, every object that she found in the abandoned site and made it into a kind of work of art to reflect on kind of what's the detritus of history, right? The detritus of history, sorry, like what's left behind. Here we have two beautiful film works. We see Gawati Vad's piece that integrates a contemplation of the borders of India, contrasted with footage of local folk performers, which allow us to kind of reflect on kind of the various levels at which divisions happen and also don't happen, and how partition is remembered on the ground. On the right is a beautiful piece that was done by one of the international artists, Jason Baird, who's an indigenous artist from Canada. And what he did was bring it to the River Ravi in Punjab. He did a ritual of healing and reconciliation, invoking not just the need to heal in relation to partition, but also the history of reconciliation and healing in Canada, where the shame and kind of presence of colonial violence against indigenous people is always present. So that was a really profound, I think, coming together of kind of forms of colonial violence that was enabled by having the artists come to Lahore. And finally, I'll end with the last piece that I wanted to discuss, which is a beautiful work, Bachpan Ka Mela, so Childhood Mela Festival, by Sierra Anwar. A film in which the grandmother of the artist here is portrayed describing a festival near her home in Jalandhar on the Indian side before they were forced to migrate. And in the recording, you can hear the child of Anwar's grandmother, this kind of childish and naughtiness. It all kind of comes through her voice. And the past is really kind of brought to us in a child's eyes. And I think that's really, for me, where we see something beautiful in the visual art and also the digital and in film that allows us to see a different side of history that we need to also account for. And it's made kind of visible through these practices. And I think that's, for me, again, fairly conventional in my own historiographical practice and literary practice. I find that exciting. So I just wanted to bring that up as something that's happening at LUMS. I hope that some members of this audience and our colleagues at BRAC, and I'm grateful to you for all you're doing to make this happen. I hope maybe some of you might join us online as well there. And thank you for the incredible work that you're doing to further all of these conversations. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And looking at the artwork and even the things that we couldn't see, it brings me to the way that we have organized this conference, the ups and downs of the organizing stage. We had a young artist approach us to say if he could do an exhibition of memorabilia, that he would organize it. He would have an exhibition space on campus, and he would use that space. And we had said, yes, go ahead. But that was early last year, sometime around this time last year, whereas the ups and downs, the excitement, and the of the uprising derailed him, I'm sure, and that is something that we had to get away from. So that's how I would begin by saying that organizing this conference has been a very exciting and difficult at the same time process for us. At one point we weren't sure that we would go ahead with it, but by October or November we had decided we would, and we were still hoping that it could be more in person than it is. There would always be an online component, I'm sure, but we have decided that some of the, well, it's on in person and online. So we are very grateful that we are able to hold it. We are very happy to be able to host it. We also would like to thank all Anne Murphy, Debjani, Sengupta, and Avishek for reaching out to us, to BRAC University, to hold this conference. At BRAC University, we are exploring interdisciplinary ways of approaching things and to develop the humanities into a humanistic or encompassing way of study. But coming to partition in the general arena of Bangladesh, I think the word that comes to mind is amnesia. We've really forgotten about it for 50 years or so. And the recent uprising has brought back a rereading of history. The danger of this rereading is that we may be in the process of forgetting 71. But, so, you know, it is a process of amnesia. 71 made us erase 47 from our memory, and now, to 2024, there is a tendency to downplay, if not erase, 71. So when you talk about amnesia, it reminds me of Ananda Jahanara Kabir's book, Partition's Post-Amnesias. And post-amnesia actually is talking about the art of remembering, with the hyphenated memory. How do we bring back, how do we reconstruct, restore a history that has been kind of erased from our intellectual lives, from our personal lives, from all of that. It's something that we have to bring back a history that has been very deliberately cancelled, to use a very contemporary word. And so I hope that we are exploring methods and methodologies of bringing back a history that affects people's lives, that affects the national life, that affects state formation, and that is being written out. And so, as I was thinking about it, the book from Bangladesh that comes to mind and really made an impression on me was my friend Ahmed Kamal's book, State versus Nation, because that is not just, that is about the early years of Pakistan and why, let us say, the Muslim League suffered a huge electorate loss in 1954 with a very popular move that was the creation of Pakistan, a peasant utopia, as Taj Hashmi puts it. How come in 7 years the machinations of the state formation, the way that the law and order and all those efforts brought in to create a difference between the popular wish for a homeland, for a Muslim homeland maybe, and what the state was doing. So this bifurcation that happened in the early years of East Pakistan is something that perhaps we could follow up in our work. And here I think the work in Bangladesh has also turned a lot towards oral histories. And that my own little delving into partition work was looking at a collection of memories by third generation people, and going to write the introduction to that collection. I was really these inherited memories. I was really struck by how people's national identities, for example, those of the Biharis, who'd never experienced Bihar, who'd never been in Bihar, who'd never been in Pakistan, had been impacted by this change in national borders, in national structures, etc. The Indian side of those inherited memories, this was inherited memories in the two Bengals. And what struck me was the Dondakarano and the thing of the Dalits, of the non-Hindro migrant to the other side. But what really happens a lot of the time is that partition studies in our country, in this part of the border, is studied as migration to West Bengal or from West Bengal to here. But there are many other borders, and we had hoped to have a scholar studying the Assam border, but unfortunately he's performing Umrah at the moment, so he can't be here with us. But the other divisions, the Tripura border, the Assam border, and also the border with Burma, which today is such a volatile one, these are elements of borderlands that determine us and affect our national and personal lives. So yes, and the literary turn, as Debjani was putting it, was very much a part of Debjani's early work on mapmaking, etc. But Nia Zaman, also with her 1999 book, A Divided Legacy, analyzing the novels in English, Bangla, and Urdu, brought to us very strongly how language became such an issue. And Anne was showing the erasure of the Urdu script in the Punjabi lands, but the erasure of Urdu in Bangladesh is comparable to the status of the Bihari in Bangladesh. And those languages which were here and are here, and how they operate and how they don't operate, is another aspect of partition studies that we need to. But as far as this workshop is concerned, we hope to further this collaboration with you so that the regional studies part will also go along. But we would also like to see this as a step towards forming a real undergraduate major in history, so that historical studies takes off, and historical studies takes off in new and exciting directions, which is interdisciplinary, which talks to people beyond our borders, which talks to people within our academies and people in other fields as well, and that would be very good. This would lead, we hope, at BRAC University to the establishment of a center for the study of the Global South, and this could be a foundation stone what comes out of this conference or workshop. So when I jumped at Debjani's email and said, yes, we are interested. We are interested for many reasons, on many fronts. We are looking at this as institutional development as well. As you know, BRAC University is a private university. It is in that sense, it is a new university. It hasn't completed 25 years, I think. It's just completing 25 years, and private universities have mainly been concentrating on business and engineering studies. So we would like to, forge new paths into the arts and the humanities. So that is really what we would like. We also hope that the deliberations, the conversations here will come out as several volumes, if not one only, and one of that will contribute to a special issue of the BRAC University Journal. So all in all, I'm very excited about this. I'm very grateful for the offer that was made to us, and I'm very happy that we took it up and we are going forward with it. Some of the panels that follow, the two panels that follow today are not going to be online, but they will be recorded, and we hope to share it with all our online participants, the recording later, because everyone, the presenters and the moderators are in country, are here, so we will hold them here, but we will definitely share them with everybody who are online, and especially people who are part of the SPARK project and who are part of the workshops that have come through. So today we are going to look at two things, new methodologies in partition studies, beginning from a very bureaucratic thing about passports to Adiba's dimensions of belonging and the non-Bengali Muslim here, and Nizam's perspective on the Bengali diaspora and influence across borders through Malaysia. But I want to point out that Adiba Amreen is really a very young participant. She's an undergraduate student. You graduated?
Just this November.
And she graduated, a fresh graduate from the Department of Anthropology. So I'm very excited to have a student. You're still a student, because when you got you were a student. And the second session is on literary representations, which is easiest for our department to organize, which is all these professors of English, Sabiha, our own Sengupta University, who will be presenting on others. And at the end of the day, we are going to have our first keynote speaker, and she's Peter Beauty, and she's from the BRAC University, and she will be speaking on telling the history, memorizing the partition in many ways. So we're looking forward to an exciting day. We will break now for tea, and we will reconvene in 45 minutes for the first session. I'm sorry for those people out there. You're not going to be part of the tea and the gossip, but we're missing you as well. And yeah, so thank you everybody. Hope to see you at 4 p.m. BST, as they say.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Firdous. It was wonderful to see everybody. And I'm definitely joining for Pipa's talk.
I'll be asleep then.
Yes. Yes.
Well, have a good day.
Yeah, okay, bye, Anne.
But
Bye.
some other people have joined in. Avishek, Alirito, please join in. Alia at 4 p.m.
Thank you. I will join. Thank you.
Thank you. So goodbye now.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.